for the good of the ANC. Gwede Mantashe must go. This is according to political analyst Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, who's with the University of Johannesburg. This follows Mantashe's announcement to challenge the Zondo Commission's latest report. Now, according to that report, Bosasa paid for work done at the ANC chairperson's properties. Now, Ndletyana says it's not about Mantashe protecting his personal reputation. What really counts is what value or harm his actions bring to the organization. Professor Ndletyana joins me in studio now alongside the ANC's head of presidency, Sibongile Besani. Gentlemen, thank you very much for making the time to actually make it to studio for this important discussion. Professor Ndletyana, let's start with you. Why does Gwede Mantashe need to relinquish his leadership position in the ANC? Is it that you're referring to, or even government?
Well, it may well be in government and possibly the ANC as well. But there's got to be consequence. He has to do something to protect his own party. That's the key thing. There are two matters here. There's one, personal reputation, and a party that has crisis of credibility. In the township, for instance, ANC politicians and party are referred to as Amakuluki, Amasela. The first word that comes to mind, you can ask anybody, Koli. What do you think when the name ANC is mentioned? Bubukogi, Bubusela, corruption. So they are synonymous with bad things, right? Yeah. With all these things. So now they've been saying they are turning a corner, moving away from this. It is not enough that they are telling us. Rhetoric alone is not enough, but they have to act on these things. So for their message of renewal to be credible, there's got to be action. Yeah. And nobody believes Mantashe when he says he didn't do anything. You don't get so expensive gifts for doing nothing, especially from Bosasa, because we know how Bosasa rolled, right?
Mr. Besani, I think the message is quite clear. So, are ANC leaders not only fooling their members when they say we are embarking on a journey of renewal, but you're also fooling South Africans? Are you talking from two sides of your mouth?
No, we're not talking from two sides of the mouth. The fact of the matter is the brand African National Congress has been battered. And flowing from our observation and our analysis, we took specific resolutions. And flowing from those resolutions, we started implementing. Part of what we had to deal with was the fight against corruption. If you would remember that since Nasrec, the Zondo Commission itself is also a product of our resolutions. And we have not only spoken about fighting corruption, we said let's go to the root cause of it. Yeah. And from that, we've also adopted, we move beyond just people or members of the ANC having to voluntarily or having to just appeal to their political consciousness. We also put in place processes to deal with things that impact on the integrity of the ANC, especially with regards to corruption. And that includes the fact that the Integrity Commission had to be in place. That includes the fact that once a person is indicted, we had to take action. So it's not as if nothing has been done. We are working on turning the corner. It's a tight corner, but we're working on it.
Professor Ndletyana, I want to ask exactly on the back of what he's saying, that if a member of the ANC is indicted, then there are processes for that person to basically be booted out of leadership structures. Interestingly, in your article you wrote in the Sunday Times this past week, you go as far as to say Gwede Mantashe does not deny receiving security upgrades at his 3 homes. Is that an admission of guilt? Because the way he sees it, he says, the commission has not found me guilty of anything. If anything, they actually still need to go and investigate. And that's why I'm saying I'm going to take what they have said against me on review.
One of the things that the party considers in this one, actually, is that, yes, if you are charged, automatically you must step down. But there may be instances where suspicion is just too great, too obvious that there's possible wrongdoing. Yeah. In that case, they can then call you to answer. Right? So in this case, it is quite clear that Mantashe got something. Yes. It's just that Zondo could not establish what he did in return. But getting something he did. Yeah. So it's not a murky case that is unclear where we need to step back and wait for the court to decide. He got something. And we know that this company is in the habit of bribing people in return for favors. So there's a sufficient misdeed there that possibly harms the reputation of the party, for which he must step down. In fact, I would have expected the party to have called him by now to say there's sufficient stain on the party for you to step back. We need not get into the technicalities because the case is clear. Mr.
Nsundu, this is why the narrative does not change that Ningamasela, not my words, the professor's words. What needs to change that narrative is for people like Gwede Mantashe to take courageous decisions and to say, I'm stepping aside because I did receive this gift. Do we agree that he doesn't deny that?
Look, he doesn't deny that. Every organization, when faced with matters like this, adopts processes. The day as the ANC, we adopt processes and then we act at variance with our own process, we'll be accused of following people or dealing with them politically or pursuing a political agenda. We have said, if your name is being spoken about, you either act voluntarily. And if you remember the Denim Caesar issue, they spent 2 years without even being pursued by state institutions. And following that 2 years of nothing being done on them, the NEC had to now act, had to say, no, come back, take your position because nothing is done. Even when 8 people, the first 8 people who were arrested on VBS, they were not arrested. So we were in that predicament. So we had to bring them back. Yeah. But flowing from that, we then adopted processes that if, for instance, you are being accused or you appear in any report, then you have to appear before the Integrity Commission. But if beyond that you are being indicted, then we took. So processes have to be followed.
So are we to assume that Gwede Mantashe is going to appear before the Integrity Commission of the party?
Remember that there's that. Members of the ANC are required that if there's anything untoward that impacts on the image of the ANC, if there's anything untoward about them, they have to appear. They have to also volunteer to appear before the Integrity Commission. That's number one. That is stated well clear in our resolution. The second issue, the issue of the national chairperson, it's an issue that has been ventilated in the Zondo Commission. And the Zondo Commission has made findings on that. What did the ANC do? We've adopted a task team to ensure that on any matter that impacts on the members, even the ANC itself, we've got to develop an approach. And that is where we are. We're receiving reports of the Zondo Commission, and a task team is working on a comprehensive, approach on that.
Professor Ndletyana, there's a task team that is collating this information.
No, it's not collating. No.
Let me answer this. Let me comment on this.
Collating.
You see, the problem has never been the process. Processes have always been there. It's always been clear in the ANC when you are accused of this or when this happens, what should happen. The problem has been lack of consistency and lack of credibility on the part of those who took decisions, right? For instance, the Integrity Commission would make findings and present them to the NEC. The NEC would not act on those findings because they are partisan, they are divided. Ace Magashule would not even present those findings to the NEC. He would not call NEC meetings to consider those findings because he would have known that those implicated are his allies. So it's lack of consistency and lack of credibility on the part of those who are in charge, not processes. Hopefully now, if you have, for instance, you have a newly constituted DC or about to be constituted, independent people outside of the NEC, Vusi Pikoli and them, those are credible independent people. Once you have, see, this is the thing about the ANC. They've been benefiting in this misgovernance, makiness of rules.
Right.
Zondo would not seek to correct the rules because he knows that one day it might be him in that corner and he will take advantage of those rules. So they've allowed the makiness because they benefited. Now that you have independent people for the first time, you might have a chance of getting things done decisively.
Mr. Besani, before you come in, there's an even worse situation that is possibly taking place in the country, and I'm turning this conversation on its head now, deliberately so, because there are warnings, not from outsiders, as in people who are not in government. This is a warning from a very senior official, a technocrat, a DG of Treasury, has warned recently that the culture of self-enrichment among some politicians and public servants is risking throwing the country into a mess. And he used the words, there are signs that the state is failing. Is that not a signal enough for the ANC to take matters such as what we are discussing about Gwede Mantashe seriously?
No, we take every comment, especially from a DG of Treasury, quite seriously. Mm-hmm. And I think those who are in the state organs must also look deeper into what is the role of technocrats that have been appointed. And there is evidence now lately that where corruption has been found, technocrats, for instance, have been complaining that they've done certain things because for fear of being expelled and so on. So, but they know that once you get appointed, they need to make sure that everybody acts within the law. So we are not taking any commentary from the DG of Treasury quite lightly.
Yeah.
And it is in that context that, and I'm happy that the professor does indicate that we are refining some of our processes. It's not that we are just deliberately creating making I'm happy that we are refining it because we are alive to the fact that the ANC itself is highly contested. It's not a secret. The contestation will come from different points of view. But we agree on the fact that in the context of renewal, we need to be sharpening our processes. That is why even on how we constitute our committees, we don't only rely on the elected leadership. We tap into the broad membership, the skills and expertise of those even outside the leadership collective, to ensure that we act and we truly renew the ANC. If we were not committed to that, we wouldn't go beyond, the elected leadership.
Yeah. Professor Ndletyana, on this issue of the country possibly being a failed state, Zondo, the DG, is warning that we are headed towards. There's an even more emphatic view from a CEO of one of the mining groups in the country, Neil Foneman, who says the country is a failed state because of a number of issues, and it counts in there the issue of lawlessness. Is there credence to such comments?
Yes, to a point. I think they are serious. We are not at a failed state status yet. But we are showing signs of heading there, and heading there quite fast. For instance, we still get services. The state can still access far-flung areas. There is compliance with rules generally. You can feel the presence of the state. The councillor in Engcobo or wherever might not be doing his job properly, but he's there. There are ward committees that are... So the state and its various functions are extended throughout society. So to say we are a failed state is an exaggeration, which might be prompted by a bit of prejudice. However, there are serious challenges. And for me, the key thing, Oli, is municipalities, for instance, appreciating the potential of those instruments of government to act as developmental agencies.
Yeah.
People in those spaces think that the only function for Omasipala is to collect rubbish, right? When in fact they have bylaws, they have revenue. You have business people, for instance, who apply for a particular plot to be turned into a place where they can build a company. Those applications take years or whatever, and some of them are not even replied to. You have heard, especially in small towns, and I've made this point elsewhere, in small towns where a company has been complaining about road potholes, that electricity simply switches off at any time. You've had a few companies leaving rural towns for other developed municipalities because it is unpredictable. They can't function properly. And what that means, Gekoli, is that that municipality loses local revenue, which would have been paid by the company. People are retrenched, which you lose also revenue. The implication of that overall is that the municipality cannot maintain its own infrastructure because municipality maintain infrastructure from locally generated revenue, right? So it's counterproductive. So you need a mental change. And I heard that SALCA had a conference lately. I don't know what they discussed, but what has been reported for me doesn't seem to be touching on any of this. So you have a crisis of leadership, of thinking, Jay, thinking.
There's a crisis of thinking, Mr. Besani. You have been in government as the ANC for, I think this is the 28th year. Do correct me if I'm wrong. How do South Africans gain confidence in what you are saying? Because the problem starts at leadership level, and it's one of the things that Neil Froneman touches on. So let's give South Africans or viewers living examples. This morning, there's going to be a judgment handed down on the perjury case of Bathabile Dlamini, the former social development minister. If the court finds against her, yes, she may well appeal, but there's a guilty find. Will she remain president of the ANC Women's League, for example?
No, I think, like we said, as a governing party, we cannot be found wanting when it comes to the question of the rule of law. For instance, we have our own internal processes, and we're trying to make sure, we're doing our best to make sure that as we implement our internal processes, they are in line with the rule of law, so we cannot be found wanting. You have made a very important issue here about practical examples. You know, today I saw a media statement from one municipality in Velkom, Mcebisi, which has close to about 500,000 population. Now, the mayor is giving a report there. You know, the mayor is giving a report. Among other things, he says, look, when we came, he came in around late November. These are the things that we found in. And in the last 3 months, you know, when we were spending close to about 10 million just on overtime, we have been able to reduce that even by more than 50%. When vehicles of municipality, which only were not maintained, many of them were just needing a battery. So I'm trying to corroborate the state of what Professor Ndletyana says, you know, because we are not defensive. But we have a leadership in that area that has been able to repair the batteries so that we don't spend close to about 400,000 monthly on repairing vehicles that could be repaired. So indeed, we had very bad experiences and poor leadership, but we think the process on how we selected majority of our mayors and so on is beginning to bear fruits. And one such example is in Mcebisi, because practically there are things that have happened, there are things that are taking place in the last 3 months to ensure that that onslaught on service delivery is being reversed. Of course, it shows that a lot still has to be done. It does not mean when you go into Mcebisi, you won't find a portal. You will find it. But at a practical level, that the action of leadership that is taking place is beginning to bear fruits. And we want everybody to emulate that example. Right. And part of what we are doing, just lastly, as the presidency, we are now responsible for monitoring and evaluation of municipalities to ensure that it's not just a talk shop. And we also follow up events and activities from leadership level of municipalities on what are you doing about the pothole, what are you doing about repairing roads or water that is not there.
All right. Professor Ndletyana, the stance here, as I'm listening carefully, is we don't want to be defensive. We're not defensive. But there are things that are happening right now in the country that may well put us on the precipice of what you say we're not at a failed state level yet. Well, ESCOM is pushing us closer to that. there are things such as Operation Dudula that are being allowed, and there's no visible leadership to go and say to communities, don't go this route. It might take us back to what we saw in 2008 at the height of xenophobic attacks. Where is leadership?
Well, that's what happens when problems have been left to linger for a while. They get to a point where they are not tolerated by people, and you have an aggressive reaction such as Dudula operation and all that. These are things that should have been solved a long time ago. So and yes, there is a lot of, the problem is that there's a lot of thinking and delayed action. For instance, now you're talking of professionalizing the civil service, thankfully, which then means, for instance, probably, I mean, you'll be amazed at this, is that since 2004, 2005, you have had squabbles in municipalities amongst councillors over appointments of city managers and executive directors. You know why? Because the councillors use city managers to influence allocation of tenders in this direction or that direction. And of course, the city manager appoints pliant executive directors. So it's a cabal. So when you have you have to appoint a new city manager, there's always squabbles. The mayor and councillors are there. Each group of councillors want their own city manager. Because right? So what the new recommendation is saying from this panel that has just presented its findings now is that take that process of selecting city managers outside. But we've had almost 20 years of this thing. There are councillors, I mean municipalities where they haven't had city managers for years because clearly they're just fighting. And everybody knows what is the cause of this. Right? So firstly you must have a serious crisis. Things must collapse.
Yeah.
Before government start acting. That is the tragedy of it.
All right. Gentlemen, we are out of time, but I've got to give you the last bit. How in the world, Mr. Besani, do South Africans, ordinary South Africans, gain confidence in what you have just said here with all sincerity when they are going to hear that there are serious considerations about those that want Zweli Mkhize, who resigned out of a scandal of corruption. And it is allegations, at least for now, on his part. But a court case was heard yesterday, and it is said, it is alleged, that the whole digital vibes scandal had to do with monies being hidden so that it is not clear that they were being channeled towards his family. How does the general public gain confidence in a party that may just put forward as one of the candidates for the position of President, Dr. Mkhize?
Look, the ANC has made a commitment about renewal, and we are going to insist on that. We are going to insist on the fight against corruption. It would be quite sad or unfortunate that members of the ANC would not take that seriously. But again, we also are compelled by the rules that we have, not only internally, even the rules of law, that if we shouldn't use, some of these processes that require legal action or litigations, to advance political agendas. But it is upon ANC members to, that's why President Ramaphosa says, if we want unity in the ANC, it has to be a principled unit. It has to be anchored on the values and principles of the ANC. That means even if there's a strong perception about you that you are corrupt, you can't take that for granted. So we expect members of the ANC to take the issue of renewal seriously, to take all these perceptions that Singama Xoki, Singama Sela seriously, because it is something, it's true. You go in other, there are times when even people were even afraid to wear ANC T-shirt. But the renewal project, it's a project that will ensure that we reclaim our space, not only a good name, but also as a leader of society. So it is upon each and every member of the ANC to understand exactly what the movement is going through.